probably going to be in the six figures on an annual basis. Alternatively, I think a budget increase would be reasonable. As you can see from the graphs that we put in front of you, our budget has really plummeted over the last few decades. It's literally lower than it was in 1990, even without adjusting for inflation. So now it's around $1 million a year. If we adjusted for inflation, it would be over $5 million a year. Another way to look at that is compare the ability to do oversight to the actual growth in government spending. It used to be that we appropriated $1 for every $1,500 that we were going to have to need to audit. We are now appropriating $1 for every $18,000 that we need to audit. And if we want people to understand that they might get audited, that somebody might be looking at things, and so they should be aligned, we probably should have to keep pace. Other thing that we've discussed in the past is even if we didn't want to make it so that all agencies bill through that billing change in 11.5B, that we would simply set the appropriate for the auditor's office at a set percentage of the total state budget, so that whether state government gets bigger or gets smaller, we're recognizing that we're going to set aside a certain amount to look over that spending. As you can see, walking through the overview, about half of our revenue is actually funded through state billings and state agencies. Another third of it is the work that we do for local entities, cities, counties, school districts, 2080 organizations, and the like. The next page that you've got there shows you which agencies are billable, which are not. Again, that's laid out in 11.5B. Then again, you've got that perspective on our appropriation since 1990, when our funding model was adopted. And so effectively, our appropriation since 1990 has been cut by 50% without adjusting, with adjusting for inflation. There's also another reason this is an important issue right now, is a nationwide accountant shortage. I haven't seen updated figures on this recently, but since the pandemic, I think about 20% of people who were working as accountants and auditors actually have left the industry. That's not unique to the state of Iowa, that's across the entire country. And so it is harder and harder for everybody to make ends meet if you're in the auditing business right now. That's our office, that's other auditing entities in the state of Iowa. And so what we continue to see is it's harder to attract staff. So of course we have to try to increase our salaries in order to keep up with the market to some degree. And we also have to increase our billing rate then to keep up with those salary increases as well. I could keep talking, but I'd rather have this be productive for all of you. I don't just want to sort of yammer at you. And so I'll pause there to see if anybody's got any questions about any of this. Or about anything else.
Thank you, Auditor Sand. Are there questions from members? You touched on one of the points that I was interested in getting an update, and that is your staffing level, and then meeting market demand as far as compensation, and then fulfilling those roles. Would you just want to elaborate just a little bit on that?
I haven't looked at numbers, but I'm pretty confident that our turnover rate has gone down. We have done a lot of work in the office to try to make it a place where people are more inclined to take a job and to stay. Some of that is very much operationally focused in terms of how they spend their day. It used to be that you might be assigned to work on an audit with someone for 3 days, and then you might not work with them again in the course of a year. A couple of years ago, we switched to teams, where your team works on audits together so that you get to know each other, you build relationships with your coworkers, and you have more long-term set of expectations for who you're going to work with. That has been effective. A lot of people used to say, like, I feel like I don't know who else works in the auditor's office, and we haven't heard that for a while. We did back in 2019 really reduce the amount of travel for people who leave. Something that definitely was leading people to leave the office, particularly if most of our hires come straight out of undergrad, And so as they're looking to, build their life and then build a family and then maybe have a kid or two, then all of a sudden all that time on the road, rather than being exciting because you're getting to see new parts of Iowa, becomes time away from your family. So we reduced that a few years ago. We have also improved our ability to work remotely. I tend to think that's a good thing. In our office, we actually let people live anywhere in the state that they want. They don't have to be in Des Moines, Ames, or Iowa City. That was a change we made in my first term as well. We wanted to have a little bit of an experience, usually a year, so that we know that they know what they're doing. But once they've done that, they can be anywhere. So we've got people in western Iowa, we've got people in southwest Iowa, we've got a couple people in eastern Iowa as well. And I think that's helpful because rural areas really need to find as many ways as possible to have people live there, be a part of that community. And if we can have people take a state job with a decent salary and good benefits and bring that to rural areas as opposed to just the metro areas of the state, I think that's good too. But it also reduces our turnover, to your question, Representative Bergen, because if you're in the Des Moines area and you're sort of stuck here, well, then we've got to compete EMC and insurance and travelers and nation principal and all that. And there's just less competition for people's employment in rural areas because you don't have those folks there.
And then I don't know if you have just general reflection on local audits, whether it's schools, cities, counties, between what your office does and what's available or been out with private CPAs.
We need more private firms helping out with these audits at the local level. Right now, there's very few firms that are doing school district audits. As you all know, school district funding is very complicated. I think one of the things that I've heard is on the docket for this year is trying to simplify those formulas. That might help. One of the other things that we've proposed is making it so that private CPA firms wouldn't have to pay taxes on income that they get from performing public sector audits. So if you're looking out for taxpayer dollars, right, that you would get paid for auditing the county, you get paid for auditing the school district, but you wouldn't have to pay taxes on that income. That's another bill that we pre-filed this year. So we've maintained our clients there for the most part. There are some that we part ways with or who decide to go a different route when their contract comes up again. But we continue to do that work, and we'd love to see more private firms doing the local work as well. But again, they're facing the same challenges that we are in terms of staffing. With a nationwide accountant and auditor shortage, it's hard for them to find people to do it. And the truth is that public sector audits have more rules around them and more expectations, and so a lot of folks find it easier to say, well, we're just going to do private sector ones instead. And that isn't something the legislature can do a lot about. They've got to follow their ethical obligations under the auditing standards.
Questions?
I've got one. Thanks, Auditor Sand. Direct and to the point. We appreciate that. So within that 1.71 million, is there additional headcount, or is that embedded within that number?
I'm going to open that up. First, I'll answer it, and then I'll tell my chief of staff that he can tell you all that I'm wrong. Here's what I would say to that. If we had that additional appropriation, the things that we would be able to do with it would be things like improve our salary structure to make our salary more competitive for the head count that we have. Right now, we are in a position where we are just generally hiring, and because we do billing, what we do is, if we have another body there, they can bill for their work, and so they're covering a lot of their own expense. Here's the details in this, and this is why, again, we're either saying you could increase our appropriation or fix our funding structure through that pre-filed bill. Our funding structure, that appropriation, is to cover the hours that we need to do for state agencies for which we cannot bill, right? So if a state agency only gets state dollars, we have to audit it, but we audit it with our appropriated dollars because we don't get to bill them. There is simply too much work to do for the amount of the appropriation that we have. And so we allocate, I know the number's in here, but we are literally thousands of hours short for the amount of time that we should be putting into those agencies versus the amount of time that we can afford to do because that appropriation hasn't grown. John, what am I missing?
I think the biggest immediate impact from the 1.7 would be the billing rates would hold steady for the foreseeable future. What's happened the last, going back to 16, local government costs have gone up dramatically. And in order to keep the federal government folks happy, we try to hold the line. But it just gets increasingly hard as overall costs go up. The gap between what we have to do and what we get paid to do gets bigger.
And I'll add, if this sounds complicated, that's because it is. The way to uncomplicate this is just to say, hey, state agencies, you get billed for your audits. If you don't like that, well, run a tight ship, and it won't be a problem. But again, the distinction between the state agencies we bill for and the state ones we don't is part of the tension there, where the appropriation increase that we're asking for is that so we can put more attention on the state agencies that don't get those federal dollars, which include big ones like the Department of Revenue. So it's not just because they don't get federal dollars doesn't mean they're not important or impactful for items. You bet.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Auditor Sand, for the presentation and the information. We just one more shot at any other questions? If not, well, thank you. Thank you for taking the time, and certainly I'm sure you're open to follow-up questions from the committee members if we have them, and I look forward personally opportunity to follow up as we get closer to bringing the budget together. And then also as we look at the combination of policy bills, as you mentioned, and those processes as we work forward on the budget. So with that, thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.